Good afternoon, guys. I am going over the final exam review. So let me type the distribution of points for the final exam. So there will be total questions. Total question 100. Each question will have 2 points. Only MCQs. Out of 100 questions, 50 questions will be from the content of term 3. And the rest questions will be from midterm 1 and 2 contents. You will have (24 hours) to complete the exam. Yeah. So please go over the notes in the slide on the bottom. I have given the. Now I'm going to go over each chapter and just go over the important highlights. This is not like this is the only question will be in the exam, but these points will be like 90% important. Okay, so I'm just gonna point in the topics. Definition of human physiology, why scientific method is most reliable, homeostasis definition, negative feedback and positive feedback mechanism. What are the component of negative feedback mechanism? Some examples of homeostasis in the body. Okay. This is just introduction to the cell, so you're going to go over these in more detail in next chapter. Okay. This is the hierarchy of a structural organization, and you need to know the component in each hierarchy, like chemical level, cellular level, tissue level, organ level, and organ system level. This is the integration, how organ system integrate with each other. Okay. Let's go to next chapter. Chemical composition of the body. In this chapter, you need to focus on what are the main components of the human body, chemical composition. What is the definition of atomic number, atomic mass, atomic weight, the atoms and ions inside the atom, proton, neutron, electron, and how they combine and form the atomic weight. Okay. Then valence electron, chemical bonds. What are the types and how they are formed? So they are covalent bonds, polar and non-polar ionic bonds, then hydrogen bonds, these things, and then definition of the enzymes. Okay. And what does the enzymes do? What is the mechanism of action of enzymes, and what are the factors which affect the effect of the action of enzymes? Yeah. In chapter 3, cells and cellular organization. What is the basic definition of the cells? What are the organelles and what are their functions? So, and then the boundary of the cell, plasma membrane, and the nucleus. So plasma membrane has a lot of things to remember. The structure, the component of the plasma membrane, the structure, what are their functions, and how material, the compound, the molecules cross through the plasma membrane. So bulk transport and transport of ionic and small particles. Okay. So phospholipid bilayer and other component of the plasma membrane, bulk transport, endocytosis, pinocytosis, receptor mediated on endocytosis, and how they are different from each other. Exocytosis, some examples. Cellular surface membrane specialization. What is the difference between cilia and microvilli, and what is the 9+2 arrangement? And if there is defect of cilia, that is called cartogenous syndromes, and how that happens. Okay. Cytoplasm organelles, pretty much all the organelles and their functions. Okay. The most important, the peroxisomes, lysosomes, mitochondria, but you have to go over every of them. Free radicals and peroxisomes, how peroxisomes is helpful in clearing free radicals in our body. Okay, so all the organelles here. Then gene expression, what are the 3 steps in gene expression to synthesize protein? Okay. Next is chapter 7, the nervous system. Okay, so nervous system. Today, in the first lecture, I have gone over the gross and microscopic anatomy of the nervous system. So just what is the central and peripheral nervous system? What are the cells in the nervous tissue, like neurons and supporting cells? And then what are the characteristics of neuron? What are the types of neuron based on their function and based on their structure? What are typical neuron, and what are their parts? What is dendrites? What is axons? And then all the supporting cells and their functions, where they are found and how they work. Okay. So here is the supporting cells in the PNS and in the CNS and their functions. You need to know all. Neuron, once dies, they never regenerate, but axon does. So what is the process of nerve regeneration? Okay. Most important, electrical activity in axons, how the axon potential is generated and transmitted in the neuron. Okay. So what is depolarization, repolarization, and hyperpolarization? Which ions moves through the gated channel that cause this? You need to know. Here is the steps. Number 1, number 2, number 3, 2A, 2B, 3, and 4. Make sure you know this. And what is the action of local anesthetic like lidocaine? What is the difference between absolute and relative refractory period? And why conduction in myelinated action is faster? Synaptic transmitter in the synapse. What are the types and how electrical impulse transmit from one neuron to another neuron through the synapse? This production, release, reuptake, and inactivation of the monoamine neurotransmitters. Don't worry about these things. Chapter 8, Central Nervous System. In this chapter, first let's know the parts of the nervous system in the central nervous system. So you start from cerebrum, and then diencephalon, then brainstem, okay? And in brainstem, you have midbrain, pons, and medulla oblongata, and then spinal cord, and spinal cord tracts, cranial nerves, and spinal nerves, okay? So parts of the brain, as I said, cerebrum and all the parts, okay? Here in the main lobes of the cerebrum and their function. The corpus callosum, which is connecting each lobe to others. On the cerebrum, what is gyrus, sulcus, and different lobes and their functions. The homunculus structure, how upper part of the body is represented by lower part of the brain, and lower part of the body is represented by upper part of the brain. Okay. Each lobe and their function, where they are found. What is EEG and what is it used for? In the cerebrum, there are some special group of nuclei we call basal nuclei. What are they and what are their function? Cerebral lateralization, what is that? And the predominance of right and left lobes. Language, which part of the brain are responsible for Broca's, the speech, and which one is responsible for comprehension. The limbing system and emotion, what are the structure and what are their function? Diencephalon, each structure like thalamus, hypothalamus, epithalamus, pineal gland, and their functions. Hypothalamus, function of the function. Midbrain, superior inferior colliculi, red nucleus, and substantia nigra, and their functions. Okay. Respiratory control center in the brain stem, particularly in the medulla oblongata and pons. What are they? What they do? Medullary spatial centers in the medulla. Spinal cord, the ascending tract and descending tracts, and where they cross in the spinal cord. Pyramidal and extrapyramidal tracts. What is ganglia? What is nuclei? What is tract? And what is the nerve? Autonomic nervous system, the definition, subdivision, and how autonomic neurons are different from somatic neurons. Two divisions, sympathetic and parasympathetic, how they are different anatomically and how they are function-wise different. You don't need to memorize this table. Neurotransmitter released by pre- and post-ganglionic sympathetic and parasympathetic neurons, and why they call cholinergic and adrenergic. We don't need to worry about these other receptors. Control of the ANS by higher brain center. Which part of the brain control autonomic nervous system? Now the spatial sense. So spatial sense is all the sense organs in the head region, and we have taste, gustation. So what is the mechanism of each gustation, like sweet, sour, salty, bitter, and umami? How we perceive these tastes. Okay, mechanism of perception of these tastes. Similarly, mechanism of olfaction. Ears are the parts, vestibular, which is responsible for balance. What are their parts? And what is the mechanism of hearing, which is the fluid within a tube. So tube within a tube is structure. What is inner tube, outer tube, what we call them, what kind of fluids are there, where are the receptors, and how we hear when we hear. Okay, why inner ear is called labyrinth. So what is the function of vestibule and what is the function of semicircular canal in balancing? The role of auricle and saccule, semicircular canal, the structure of the ear, external and middle ear, and then role in hearing. Okay. So pretty much in here, everything is important, very important. Middle ear structure, scala vestibule, scala tympani, and cochlear duct in the inner ear, and how we hear when we hear. Okay. Neural pathway for hearing, and this deafness and hearing impairment is very, very important. Vision in the ear, three tunics. Three tunics. Okay, welcome back. I'm sorry, I was distracted. So tunics of the ear and all the structures in the ear, how they are formed, what are their functions. Tunics of the eye, not ear. The the light reflects, how pupil is contracted and relax, increase and decrease in diameter with the action of light and darkness. Okay. Some spatial structure of the eye, like optic disc, blindness of optic nerve, fovea centralis, macula lutea. What is refraction? And how refractive index change when the medium change. Accommodation, what is it? Which structure do that? These visual acuity and the visual defects, hyperopia, myopia, and astigmatism. their correction. Okay. Cones and its function, rods and its function. In muscular system, this chapter is very important. Pretty much everything I will ask you to go over. Everything. I don't think you can leave anything. Okay. So go over in detail in this chapter. Pretty much everything. Rigor mortis, what is it? How that happens. Okay. Role of calcium. Excitation, contraction, coupling. And you don't need to muscle relaxation. And you don't need to go over cardiac or smooth muscle here. Okay. Now circulatory system. Chapter 13. What is the difference between circulatory and cardiovascular system? Blood, what is the function of circulatory system? Composition of blood, it's everything pretty much. I will not say you these plasma proteins and their functions are formed elements, erythrocytes, their structure, their function, white blood cell, there is structure, function, differentiation, and most importantly, hemoglobin in the red blood cell. There is structure and function, okay? So leukocytes are two types, agranular leukocytes and granular leukocytes. What are they and how their structures are different, as well as their functions, okay? Platelets, which is also called megakaryocytes, help in blood clotting and then blood typing. What is the basis of typing? How is antigen and antibodies of the blood typing different from each other? What are the ABO system and RH system? What is the transfusion reactions? What is universal and donor and universal recipient? Similarly, what causes erythroblastosis fetalis? Homeostasis, how platelets helps in plugging the cut in the blood vessel wall. Okay. Circulatory system part 2 is everything about the heart. So please go over in detail all the parts of heart, two atria, two ventricles, septum, all the valves, then circulation, pulmonary circulation, systemic circulation, cardiac cycle and heart sound. What are the 4 stages in cardiac cycle? This one here. Similarly, this definition in diastolic volume, stroke volume, and systolic volume. What produces heart sound and what is murmur? Electrical activity in the heart, what are those nodes? SA node, AV bundle, right and left bundle branch, and Purkinje fibers. SA node, pacemaker. So how the SA node is depolarized and that action potential passes from SA node to other parts and then to the other nodes, and how that activate the cardiac muscles. Then myocardial cells action potential. So you have to remember too how action potential generation in SA node is different from action potential generation in myocardial cells. Conducting tissues of the heart. EKG, what are they and what are these PQR, PQRS and T waves? Chapter 14 is all about the definition here at the beginning. Stroke volume, what is it? Heart rate, what is it? And what is the formula for cardiac output? So how is stroke volume is different from cardiac output? What is the total volume of our blood volume? A regulation of cardiac. So how sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous system affect cardiac rate? How to regulate it? Where is the cardiac control center? Okay. And again, these volumes. So how stroke volume is determined? How EDV affects stroke volume, how TPR affects stroke volume, and how contractility affects the stroke volume. So here is regulation of stroke volume. Know them, okay? How the sympathetic stimulation increase the uh, contractility, and what is Frank-Starling law of the heart? Variables that affects venous return, like the parasympathetic nervous system, sympathetic nervous system, and according to Frank-Starling, this is end-diastolic volume and stretch. Okay. Hypertension, what are types and what are the causes? Now, the last part of the immune system is the circulatory system is the immune system. And in the first, you go over the overview of immune system and how innate and acquired immunity is different from each others. So innate immunity, or we call them non-specific immunity, and adaptive or specific immunity. So innate is inherited as the part of structure of each organism and comprises all the white blood cells except lymphocyte, because lymphocytes are the cells which are responsible for specific or adaptive immunity. That's why you have to expose to the microorganism before you can produce adaptive immunity. So compare them. How do cells innate immune system recognize invaders? What are they? What is PAMPs and what is toll receptors? Pathogen associated patterns, PAMPs, most important are lipopolysaccharides and peptidoglycans, and receptors are called toll receptors, which recognize these the PAMPs. Phagocytosis process, what are the cells involved and how it happens? Some non-specific mechanism are interferon, favors, and what is the effect of interferon? So you know interferon is non-specific immunity against virus infection. How it is produced? Adaptive immunity and the role of antigen, haptens, and the mechanism of immunoassays, how you do. Yeah. Now we go to all about immune system in part 2. So function of B lymphocyte, basically. B lymphocyte becomes plasma cell and produce antibodies and fight particularly extracellular bacterial infection, whereas T cell get activated and they attack the infected cell or abnormal cells. Okay. So what is antigen definition? T lymphocytes, where they mature. B lymphocyte, how they produce and where they mature. What is humoral and cell-mediated immunity? Thymus and secondary lymphatic organs, which help in maturation of T lymphocyte. And local inflammation is the process to control the infection and to present antigen to the lymphocytes. So function of B lymphocytes, types of immunoglobulins and their functions, antibody structure, which one is variable and which one is constant, T cells, how they get active, and how T cell recognize antigen presented by antigen presenting cells, and how T cell then attack the target cells. Okay. Types of T cells like killer or cytotoxic T cells. What are their CD8 surface marker? Similarly, helper and suppressor T cells. Primary and secondary response. So when you get first time infection, that is primary, and subsequent infection is secondary. Active and passive immunity, how they are put different from each other and their examples. Okay. Autoimmune disease, how our body forms autoimmune disease and some examples. Now the respiratory system. In this system, first the structure of respiratory system and the three related function of the respiration, which is ventilation, gas exchange, and O2 utilization, and most importantly, differentiate between external and internal respiration. How they're so three terms: ventilation, external respiration, and internal respiration. How they're different from each other. Structure of the respiratory system: conducting zone versus respiratory zone, histology of alveoli in the lungs, and the intrapulmonary and transmural pressure change during the inspiration and expiration. How surface tension keeps the alveoli pressure increase all the time. Type 1 and type 2 alveolar cells and their functions. What is respiratory distress syndrome, RDS or ARDS and ARDS? So RDS is called IRDS and ARDS is different. So how RDS is different from ARDS? Mechanism of breathing during quiet breathing and during deep breathing. Spirometry, and all the terminologies here. Gas exchange, partial pressure, Dalton's law, Henry's law, and blood PO2 and PCO2 measurement in the pulmonary and systemic circulation. What are the structure in the brain which regulate your breathing? And those breathings are autonomic and voluntary breathing, how they are different regulated by our brain. Effect of blood PCO2 and pH on ventilation. What does increased carbon dioxide and change in pH cause to the ventilation? CO2 transport and O2 transport. Last, the renal system. Organs of the renal system. How organs of the renal system is different in male and female. Sorry. Structure of the kidney. What is medulla, what is cortex, and what are other structure like renal pyramids, renal column, minor calyces, major calyces. Mechanism of urination, which is called mechanism of micturition. Role of sympathetic, parasympathetic, and somatic nervous system. Microscopic structure and the nephron. So structure of nephron is very important. What are the part of a typical nephron and how they produce blood flow in the kidney and how they filter blood to make urine. So parts of the nephron. Based on the location of the nephron, there are cortical and juxtamedullary nephron. Identify them and differentiate them. What is the role of proximal convoluted tubule, glomerulus, and distal convoluted tubule? GFR and what is regulated, what are the factors which regulate GFR? Okay, so regulation of GFR. Okay, guys, so this is all in the pretty much summary of for the final exam. You will be mostly tested on these things I have talked about, and rest midterm 3 is already fresh in mind. So I will say go over them in very detail now, because you'll have equivalent to another exam in the final from the midterm 3. So I'm not going to go over the review of third midterm because that is fresh and you know it. Okay, I'm going to grade your exam and put the you're going to see the exam answer too before the final. Okay, thank you very much.